Posted by you/Horina69. Something is wrong with my girlfriend. Me, M26, and my girlfriend, F25, have been living together in an apartment for 2.5 years. Everything has been normal until quarantine started, around 4 weeks ago, when I started noticing some odd things. For instance, for the last 3 weeks or so, my GF has been putting sugar in her morning coffee, while throughout our entire relationship she's always been very much against it. It may seem like a small detail, but she's always been complaining about how I don't know what real coffee is since I put quite a lot of sugar. On the first day that I saw her drinking coffee with sugar, I asked her why would she do that, and she looked at me weirded out and said something like, "What are you talking about? I've always been putting sugar in my coffee." I felt a bit confused for a moment, but then we started talking about some other things, so I didn't think any more about it until the morning after, when she did the exactly same thing, and had once again the same reaction. Fast forward a few days and another odd thing happened. We were having sex and she suddenly suggested a sex pose that we had already tried once, but it had gone wrong and it hurt her a lot, so we had simply decided not to try it anymore. Naturally, I was very surprised with her suggestion, and reminded her about the time when it went wrong, and she just completely dismissed it, saying that I probably mixed her up with some ex-girlfriend or that I was just tripping. We then did the pose and we actually enjoyed it. Today, the weirdest thing happened, which is the reason I'm writing this post. In the afternoon, I was working at home. I'm employed as a PhD student at the computer science department of a university, when my GF asked me what's up with a guy who I've never heard of before. I asked her who is she referring to, and she said, "Well, it's that colleague of yours who you always talk about, the one from the company where you are employed at." I froze, and asked her to repeat, and she said the exactly same thing all over again. Then I told her that I don't work at any company, nor have I ever worked at any company, since I started a PhD straight after my master degree. At this point, she also completely froze and we were just staring at each other completely confused and shocked for a few moments. She then asked me WTF is going on, and I reminded her about the coffee thing and about the sex pose and that I don't know anymore what is going on. At this point, she started crying too and asked what is wrong with us. Nor she, nor me, nor anyone in both families have ever had any mental problems in the past. We don't know what to do about this. Can anyone explain what's wrong with us? Posted by you/redditleaders. I died in late 2015. I was given a second chance. I've never used Reddit before, but a friend of mine was talking to me about the glitch in the Matrix subreddit, so I decided to share my story here, since I don't have any explanation for it almost 3 years later. Rewind back to September 2015, I was a freshman who had just entered high school 2 weeks prior. Already school was weighing down on me, and I'd been continuing a habit I had of going on walks to clear my mind. On this day, I'd been walking around a pond near my house. There's a trail that goes around the pond, and then the trail leads up to a set of abandoned train tracks on the other side, which sit about 15 feet above the path and pond below. After walking the circle, I was crossing the train tracks when I decided I wanted some ice cream. The fastest way to get to the ice cream shop was to take the path below the train tracks, but there isn't any way to cross the pond without going all the way back around, and being 14 years old, I decided that I could just jump from the tracks onto the path below and keep walking. Looking down from above, it didn't seem to be that far of a jump, so that's what I did. The next thing I remember after that was being half conscious in an ambulance. Everything was extremely blurry and the paramedics sounded slightly panicked. I wasn't able to move either of my legs, so I think they were both broken. This scene continued on for a few minutes, until we arrived at the hospital and I was wheeled into the emergency room on a stretcher. I only had a few minutes in emergency before I eventually lost all consciousness, and that was the last thing I saw. After I'd been unconscious for what felt like about an hour, I opened my eyes and I was on the ground. I'd just hit the ground after jumping, but this time I was fully conscious. I hadn't noticed this before I jumped, but there had been a car parked watching me. I think they thought I was attempting suicide, but it probably looked that way, and the people in it had jumped out and called an ambulance for me. The ambulance ride had been the exact same as it was the first time, and I was put into the same emergency room that I had died in before. The only difference between the two events were that I was fully conscious this time, and my injuries were much more minor. I was discharged from the hospital the same night, with only stitches in my lip, a slightly fractured jaw and a mild concussion. For a while after this, I assumed that the first scenario had just been a weirdly coincidental dream that I'd had while I was unconscious, so I didn't consider it anything abnormal. It wasn't until a few weeks after, when my mom told me that the people who had helped me said that I had been conscious the entire time, I hadn't been knocked out after hitting the ground or anything. So, that entire scenario managed to happen in the few seconds it took for me to hit the ground, while I was still conscious. Anyways, I'm not very good at describing things, especially with how blurry this day was now that it was years ago. But, I'm 17 now, and I still have no way to explain what happened that day, other than I died, and was given a second chance. Posted by you/Dolan Throwaway. Telling my doctor about my glitches got me diagnosed with narcolepsy and basically saved my life. Hi, delete if not allowed, thought I'd share a random funny, but kinda sad, moment. For years, I've always had little things happen to me where I distinctly remember things one certain way and they'd appear another. For example, I'd get super bored in church or something as a kid, would look at my legs and always remembered a mole I had was on the right, but a few weeks ago, I noticed it's now on the left. I was talking to my doctor about what I called IRL highway hypnosis, where I'd have an object, tell myself I was putting it in a certain location where I'd obviously remember it, and never find it until weeks/months later. It was as if I was running on autopilot and my brain wasn't actually online, or I'd remember something as a specific date, like I remember my boyfriend's birthday occurring September 28th, but it always has been August 27th. This got me in trouble several times. I'm a very visual person, so I remember things such as routes to destinations by visual landmarks and not street names. So I often had debates with people where I'd remember a specific landmark on one side of the road or at another location. I can't remember specific huge glitches ATM, probably because I'm on the spot and I'm nervous, but stuff like this happens to me all the time. I chalked it up to some sort of medication side effect, but the neurologist reminded me I haven't been on any drugs to trigger lapses in memory. I would get terrified reading r/glitch_in_the_matrix stories because they were so near and dear to my heart. But I always thought whatever matrix I was in really valued me as a person, because once or twice a month, I would have thought I had eaten all of a specific food in the fridge and I'd come back later and realize I had more. So my neurologist stops me and asks if I have ever had any neurological symptoms such as losing control of my body but being awake. I told him I had a distinct memory in the 7th grade of asking my friends if they've ever laughed so hard it felt like someone kicked them behind the knee and they fell down. All the kids said something along the lines of absolutely not. I also have events where I pass out but I'm not dizzy or sick, I just wake up a few seconds later. I did attribute it to dizziness however. I stopped showing emotion for years out of fear of falling down or this passing out feeling. He kept asking me questions and after all the tests, I now have this diagnosis. Turns out my body/mind would confuse REM cycles, so during the day, my mind would almost be in a sort of REM cycle, which is why I'd have glitches. A doctor described it as my mind filing certain memories away as dream memories. I'm so relieved because I thought I was just a freak of nature that attracted such weird activity like a magnet, but it turns out I'm just narcoleptic with pretty severe cataplexy. The falling down is what makes cataplexy a pretty serious occurrence. I laughed when I was told I had narcolepsy, but I was told people who fall down or pass out like I do have sometimes hit their heads or crashed their cars. I'm now being treated for that, and I'm so happy this casual conversation about day-to-day quinkidinks lead to solving this huge issue I had. Edit. I realized the title sounds super clickbaity, so I wanted to clarify there have been times where I've fallen down. Fortunately, I was always near a couch or someone who could catch me. I've narrowly avoided hitting my head many times, although I've suffered from 2 concussions because of this. This actually led me to be super avoidant and unable to leave my apartment, out of fear of passing out. Now I know what's up and I'm so grateful. Typically the passing out events would occur around the same time I'd have glitches, so I'm glad to know the two are connected and treatable.